Kāti mauriora kia tātou, tēnei te mihi kia tātou, ko whakarau I ka mai nei, ki te ruku ki te hōhonutanga o tēnei kaupapa, ara te Biosecurity ko Tame Malcolm tēnei, e mihi kaua tōna kia koutou, o tira ko te tira whakamātaki tēnei, e mihi kaua tōna kia tātou katoa. Kia tīmata ai tēnei hui I rungi te pai, tēnei wāranga I rungi te pai, Nino I tātou waira ki runga, waira ki raro, waira ki wainginu a tātou katoa. Waira I ngā taumatanga e pēhine I a tātou katoa, o tira I te whanganui a tara I tēnei wā tonu, tūturu whakamaua kia tīna, haumie huie, kai ki e. Kia ora everyone and welcome. What a cool turnout we have. Seeing a lot of familiar faces on our Zoom. And of course we are live streaming this onto our Facebook and other social media platforms. I'll be your host for tonight. I am Tame, and just before we kick off, I want to remind everyone, please keep your microphones on mute, and it's up to you if you want to put your camera on. I do enjoy seeing the faces, but if you don't want to show us your face, keep it quiet. We will be taking questions throughout this webinar, so by all means, send them through on the chat here on Zoom, on our Facebook channels, or message us or email us, whatever you want to do to get those questions in, please do, and we'll answer those at the end of our pre-planned questions. With that, I will pass over to Mel to briefly introduce Te Tira Whakamātaki.
Ngā kia ora Tame and ngā mihi to our whānau. Welcome all to our second in our webinar series, which is focused on helping everyone understand what biosecurity is. As you all know, we're passionate about biosecurity, but we acknowledge that lots of people don't actually know what biosecurity is. And so we started a webinar series that has slowly been building since last year up until the end of June, which is to talk about biosecurity from a Māori perspective, biosecurity the system, biosecurity 101, what biosecurity looks like for our whānau offshore, and the like. And that is a series that Te Tira Whakamātaki is committed to. So we look forward to seeing you all monthly to have these really cool conversations with us. And we thank Biosecurity New Zealand and ko tātou for their support and for being the collaborators with us in this cool series. Te Tira Whakamātaki is an Indigenous environmental not-for-profit. We are a for-purpose company as well, so a for-purpose company that supports a charitable foundation. Many of you know us as either the Tame Brigade or the Mel and Amanda and Nick Brigade, but actually we're just a bunch of Māori researchers and kaitiaki who are passionate about protecting the things that we value and ensuring that Indigenous solutions are supporting our responses to environmental issues here in Aotearoa, and supporting our Indigenous whānau offshore do the same. And we again thank you all on behalf of our board, our directors, our trustees, and in particular our kāhui, chaired by Matua Kevin Prime. Thank you all for your support and for joining us. And I'll hand back to you, Tame, because I'm the least interesting today.
All right. With that, we are pretty pleased to bring you our guests for tonight, who will be asking questions. And I'm not going to say grill, because they'll probably grill me in turn. But I like to think of them as the left bow and right bow of our biosecurity system. And for those who play euchre, you'll know what I'm talking about. They're our trump cards. So with that, I will pass it over them to introduce themselves, starting with you, Stuart Anderson.
Tēnā koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko Table Mountain, te maunga, ko Princess Fly, te moana, no ko te rana, o ku tupuna, I whānau mai au ki a whereka, ki te tonga, ke pore rua au e noho ana. Ko Anderson te iwi, ko Stuart tōku ingoa, ke manatu ahu mātua au e mahi ana, he tumuaki tuarua, te akitanga pūtai o Aotearoa au nō reira. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you. I'm Stuart Anderson. I'm the Deputy Director General of Biosecurity New Zealand. Still relatively new to the role, I'll say. Started just before Christmas. Thank you.
Cool, and you're definitely no stranger to the biosecurity system, as we'll hear from you later as well. Over to you, Stu Hutchings.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko tauhara te maunga e whakatau ana e aho. Ko tōpū nui tia te moana e whanga ana e aho. No Mao ki tō ranga moana oho, ko Stu Hutchings aho. Nei mihi mahi atu, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Oh, Stu, thank you so much. All right, so first question I thought I'd start us off with. is having worked with you guys previously, know a bit about your guys' background, but I thought it might be interesting for others to hear about your background and sort of what got you to where you are. So we'll start with you, Stuart Anderson, if you want to give us an outline of sort of how you got to where you are.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tame. Yeah, so I guess I probably had a bit of a varied career pathway to get here. So I'm originally, as I said, I'm originally from South Africa, and I trained as a forester. That was my background. So I went to university with my forestry degree, and then I went and did the old OE, landed up in New Zealand in 2001. And I had a period for about 8 or 9 years. I was a scientist, so I worked for Scion, the Crown Research Institute, forestry, and I was, like I said, I was a scientist, and I ended up leading the forest fire research project out of that, which was a great experience, and it really got me to understand, a lot about New Zealand and the natural environment, and make some good connections through that. I then joined the ministry, MEF, before it became MPI in 2010, and since then I've done quite a number of roles actually, which has been a fantastic experience because it's given me really good exposure across all the different industries and different stakeholders and the sectors and treaty partners, which has been really good. So I spent 4 years in Rotorua to start with, in the regional policy team there, and looked after a whole range of things: environmental policy and adverse events, disasters, forestry, etc. And then a bit of a pathway when I moved to Wellington. I had some time in policy, led the economic and analytics team, which was interesting, not knowing anything about economics, but that's the team that does all the forecasting of the exports, imports, and the revenue for primary industries. Had a stint back in forestry for a period, leading the operational regulatory area of forestry. Then quite a different period in fisheries for 3 years, which was very good experience and very interesting, and a very different sector to work in. But that was really helpful as well. It really exposed me a lot to working with treaty partners, which was a fantastic experience for me. And then more recently, just before this role, I was the director running the Mycoplasma Bovis Programme, which I can talk about a little bit later. Our biggest biosecurity response, big animal disease response in New Zealand. I did that about 2 years ago. I stepped into that role, and just before Christmas, I was really fortunate to be appointed as the new Deputy Director General for Biosecurity New Zealand and MPI. So, like I say, I'm still relatively new into the role, I would say, but yeah, huge privilege to be appointed into that role, and yeah, hugely excited about the opportunity to play, to be part of the biosecurity system and keep moving things forward.
I think if there was ever a way to get all these listeners on your side, it was to pretty much share your background that you touched on: science, economics, policy, government, treaty partners. I think that covers just about most of the people watching tonight. So good one. And obviously, Stu, you and I, we go back a bit. We worked together in Animal Health Board days, and I see Steve Sharp's on board as well, who's also worked with us there. But same question to you. What sort of got you to where you are now?
Yeah, a bit of a very different pathway, I guess, from Stu. I originally trained as a veterinarian and worked in a veterinary practice in around Lake Taupo, and did that for a lot of years. And out of that work, became really interested in population disease management, and specifically around bovine tuberculosis. There was a lot of deer farms in that central North Island area, and a lot of them got bovine TB. And so I became really interested in helping those farmers manage that disease, and of course the interrelationship between them and the wildlife, the possums that were carrying the disease. So part of that work in my practice, I then started contracting and working to the Animal Health Board to help manage and help the farms that had bovine TB on them, and got more and more interested in that, to the point where the Animal Health Board said, well, rather than us contracting you and you costing us a lot of money, why don't you come and work for us? And so I did shift across and worked for them there. And that Animal Health Board eventually merged into becoming Osprey, which then took on the animal tracing NATE activity as well as the bovine TB activity. So I had about 8 or 9 years working in that role, and then was offered an opportunity to shift entirely out of the animal disease management sphere and take up a role as Chief Executive Officer for kiwi fruit vine health. So had to really do a total shift of thinking away from animal diseases and into plant diseases. So a massive learning curve for me, but found interesting that the principles around biosecurity are really similar across both. So while I was learning a whole lot of new stuff about plant pathology, found that disease management principles and the approach to that across a whole industry was very, very similar. So I guess that experience that I had there, plus the relationships that I formed across a whole range of stakeholders, but specifically through the government industry agreement work. So I ended up working with other industry partners within horticulture, but also with MPI. And so eventually had the opportunity to take all of that experience from industry and those two ranges species and move into this role that I've currently got now, which is Chief Biosecurity Officer. And so the real exciting thing about that role for me was that it was a very systems approached role. So I kind of started my career down at individual animal level, then built up to population thinking, and then built up to national control programs, and then went across into the plant and national control programs at KVH, primarily a lot around PSA, and now to a systems approach. So that's been a really exciting journey for me, and being able to look across the systems and see how can we combine those and make them work better, and bring in all of the stakeholders that are involved in those systems and try and work in a collaborative way to a better outcome for the biosecurity system.
Good stuff. And as I sort of listen to both of you guys explain your background, I see good diversity. And to be honest, you need diversity in experiences if you want to lead the system for change. I should thank you as well, Stu Hutchings. Not many people know this, but when you and I worked together, or when I worked at Animal Health Board, when you were there, I told my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, she's in the kitchen next door, but I said to her that I work with animals, which is true. And I said, I work with vets and we work with puppies and stuff like that, which is not entirely untrue, but at that stage I was killing possums. So it sounded a lot better when I told her that I work with puppies and vets than I kill possums. But she married me, so I must have done something right.
Yep.
As a brief overview, for those who don't know, the biosecurity system is responsible for a great many things, obviously protecting Aotearoa from pests and diseases. And as I mentioned at the start, we're very fortunate with these guests, Stuart Anderson being the Deputy Director General, and for those who don't know, it's basically the top person. He leads the whole show, and Stu being the Chief Biosecurity Officer. Like he said, he's got that system overview. But rather than me trying to explain it and do a bad job of it, I'll pass over to you, Stu Hutchings, to give us an overview of the biosecurity system. So what is it?
Okay, so what I'm going to try and do, technology allowing, is to share a screen, because I've got a short animated kind of PowerPoint that will help me explain the story. So we'll work our way through that, hopefully. So presumably you can all see that.
Not yet.
Okay.
No, not yet.
Not yet. How about that one now?
See anything?
Still not yet.
Bear with us. We're trying to get something going in the background. Oh, there we go.
Okay, good. Phew, it's always a bit scary when you start on these, and even though you do a practice, things don't work for you. So what I wanted to start with is just explaining that often people think about the biosecurity system as our border, and that it sort of starts and stops there, and the border's entire job is to stop any incoming risk coming into New Zealand and basically act as the system. And the system is actually a whole lot more than that, and is made up of a series of layers, and each of those layers is designed to try and manage risk or reduce risk as it moves through them. So there's a whole bunch of definitions about what we mean by biosecurity, but one of them I've got up on here, which is in the New Zealand context, is protection from the risks posed by harmful organisms to the economy, our environment, and our people through exclusion, eradication, and control. And what I like to describe it as is there's a flower diagram that I use. And so if we think about the values of what we're trying to protect across our system, those values are our economy, our biodiversity, which is unique to New Zealand, and our native taonga is a huge component of that, our lifestyle, our culture, and our social values. And then if we think about what are the things that are pathways of risk or that can help damage those values, we can cluster those into 3 broad areas. So travel is a pathway that brings stuff in, trade is a pathway, and our natural environment also. When we think about things like wind, you know, we can have pests or insects flying across to New Zealand by the wind. So what we need to do is have a system that sits between those pathways of risk and our good values, and that system is designed to try and help protect us from those risks that are occurring. So if we dive into that system and have a look at the activities that go into it, we can see that there's 6 major activities that sit within there. The first one is really key. That's about being prepared. So it's actually thinking about what could come at New Zealand and what do we have to do in order to be ready for that. And a big part of that is thinking about the prevention stuff. And a lot of that prevention happens offshore, so before things even get to New Zealand at all. And if it does get through into New Zealand, then we have a response phase, which means that the risk did manage to get through. And a really important point to note here is there's no such thing as zero risk. We can never exclude it entirely. So we need to have mechanisms in place post our border so that we're able to respond to those and deal with them and hopefully eradicate them. On the other side of that response phase, we have a recovery. So that might be, yes, we were successful in eradicating and the disease is now gone, or the pest is now gone. However, if that doesn't work, we then also need to think about long-term management of our pests. And we do have a whole host of pests in New Zealand that are here to stay. We call them endemic, and we need to manage those on a long-term basis. We need to reflect back and review and report on how we did with any of those activities, and then take the lessons learned and adjust what we do and go back around our cycle. So if we look at the functional areas that we have across that biosecurity system, the key one we've got is the offshore function. So you can see in this diagram that we've got risk kind of coming in on the left-hand side of your screen, and we're trying to manage or reduce that risk as it runs through the system. So the big important part where the biggest risk lies is in fact offshore, because if we can actually reduce or remove that risk before it even gets to our border, then we don't have to deal with it either at the border or within New Zealand at all. So we've broken those functional areas up into the offshore area, the border area, and what we call domestic, which is everything that happens after something gets into New Zealand. So then around the outside of that system, we've got a whole grouping of stakeholders or people that are involved in that system, and it's a really important component to think about. So the one that a lot of people are aware of, obviously, is the general public, all of the individuals, all the community groups that are out there, and some classic ones of those are like Aotearoa Moana Biosecurity Capital, where we've got an amalgamation of really like-minded individual businesses who are really keen on understanding biosecurity risk and raising that awareness. Also around there, we've got our industries and our businesses. So they all interact with the biosecurity system, whether they're importers or traders or interested groups or our industry groups that are doing our primary production, who obviously stimulate and work with our economy. We've got science and research, which is an incredibly important component because that's what informs how we work in our biosecurity system. So without doing that research and making ourselves science informed, we can't be sure that we're doing the best possible things towards the outcome that we're trying to achieve. We've got regional councils. A lot of people forget that regional councils are a really integral part of our biosecurity system. So they operate with regional pest management plans, and obviously with those, they're trying to manage risk within the particular region that they have a focus on, but we need to make sure that we're all acting in alignment. Similarly, we've got other government agencies, and by that I mean groups like DOC, who have the focus around biodiversity, but there's an incredibly strong linkage between what we do with biosecurity and how that impacts on our biodiversity activity. Encapsulating all of that, we have Māori and our treaty partners, and that often is forgotten that in fact the interests and collaborative efforts need to occur right across the entire biosecurity system. It's not only that part that's post our border. So that's why I've kind of got them represented right around the outside. And then collectively working in a collaborative way with Crown, with us at Biosecurity New Zealand. So you can kind of see we've got this picture of how the system operates as a collective. And then within it, we drive our inputs, which is our financial inputs, our people inputs, our infrastructure, our systems. And out of that comes the outputs or products that we use, or the tools that help drive the system towards the outcomes. And the outcomes are trying to reduce the impact of harmful pests, make our biosecurity system stronger, help our imports and exports to contribute to our growth and prosperity, and try and have everybody within New Zealand being aware of their role in that biosecurity system. So making it an effort across all of New Zealand, and that's where the team of 5 million in Kotata comes from. So if you kind of finish the picture there, you can see that you've got this system capability sitting in the middle, and that's driving our activity. And a really key final component is surveillance. So without surveillance, we don't know what potentially has got into New Zealand. So it's an incredibly important part, because the earlier that we can detect something coming into New Zealand or understand how far it might have spread, the greater chance that we've got of eradicating it. So what I was quite keen to do with this is just use a bit of a case study for how this system works. And I thought brown marmorated stink bug would be a good case study to use. So as a lot of you will be aware, it's primarily a pest in the northern hemisphere around the world. It originated in China, and there's a whole host of countries, especially in the northern hemisphere, that have this pest. And it's a really nasty pest. It's known to chew up over 300 different species of plants. It would certainly be a massive risk to our native taonga species, and we don't want it here in New Zealand. So what we do as part of the first part of the system is use our intelligence systems to understand where it is in our offshore countries, how fast it's moving, what's going on a seasonal basis, and on the back of that, do treatments or prevention activities offshore. And when I'm saying that, I'm thinking about cars that are being imported are treated at their port of origin before they leave to come here, making sure that any cargo that's coming in is either treated or inspected, so that when these things actually get to the New Zealand border, most of the potential for those pests have been removed before they even get here. So it's always an important thing with offshore, where your risk is biggest, to put most of your activity and focus in reducing that risk before it even arrives. When it gets to the border, all of these products are they're inspected. Now, not every single thing can be inspected. So again, what we do there is we think, okay, what products might have the greatest risk? Let's focus our inspection activities on looking for those here. Occasionally, if we think about the pathways sometimes with furniture or people coming in with their bags and they're travelling, you can get some of the pests come in with those. So then, should a population establish in New Zealand, we need to have a readiness program in our domestic space. So that's where we've done a whole lot of work thinking about what could we do should we get a population here. So we've done work around getting approval for use of samurai wasp as a treatment should it get into New Zealand. So we've got that sitting there ready. We've got other treatments sitting there potentially. We're thinking about what physical covers could we put over our orchards to minimise the impact of brown marmorated stink bug on kiwi fruit or apples or pears or any of those potential orchards that could be impacted. So I thought I'll stop there, but I just thought it was a good case point for explaining how that system worked. So I'll also stop sharing.
Cheers for that. I really like those diagrams because they're quite elegant and they explain the system well. And I've been in the system about 10, 15 years now, but I don't think I've ever understood it as simply as that. So appreciate that. And we'll come back to the brown marmorated stink bug because I do want to, there's a few questions that popped up from that alone. Mel?
Yeah, I want to talk about what Tommy said, and thank you so much for that, Stu. I think that's a really articulate and easy way to understand the biosecurity system and all the compounding factors and the things that those working in the system are taking into consideration from offshore, pre-border, right through to when you're managing and trying to recover from an incursion. And I congratulate you on the new graphics, because we're so used to seeing this kind of really old biosecurity system flowchart kind of model that is quite hard to understand and comprehend and a bit weird actually. But I want to focus a wee bit on pre-border at the moment, so the offshore stuff, and ask you, Stuart, if you could talk to us a wee bit about how we try and push risk offshore and some of the agreements we have around importing, exporting countries and how that works. Because when we talk to our whānau out in the communities, they quite often talk about, not realizing how much is involved in the pre-border space and how Māori actually want to have a bit of a say in there and a bit of a tutu. And in part, that's because we hear from our Indigenous brothers and sisters around the world their concerns. And so we do have a wee bit of a heads up on what we think could be coming, and would be really interested in the processes you go through of thinking about offshore risk. Yeah,
sure. Thanks, Mel. So obviously Stu's given a really good overview of the whole system and all the different bits of it. The border itself, well, depending on where you look at it, but probably the border itself, or if you've ever been involved with a domestic sort of biosecurity issue or response at the local level, those are the more obvious things around the biosecurity system. And certainly, for those of us who go through the airports in normal times, it's our staff standing on the border searching for food, and the dogs, the obvious bits of biosecurity. But actually, it's that pre-border area, what happens offshore, where we put a huge amount of our effort and focus and resources in, and where most of our risk is actually managed. And as Stu said, the system is really all about protecting New Zealand from harmful pests and diseases. And the best way we can do that, first of all, is to prevent stuff getting in here. So like I say, within the system and within Biosecurity New Zealand and all our staff and the work, a lot of it is in that offshore pre-border area. So we do that in a number of ways. We have lots of rules around what comes in, and different things we do around managing and overseeing what comes in. But it's also I'll talk a little bit more about it, but it's also it's a risk-based approach, and it's also recognizing that we do need things coming in and out of New Zealand, people and goods and stuff we trade. We're obviously a trading nation. We rely heavily on that. We're joined up to a global economy, and our people and goods do need to move. So there's always a risk that goes with it. So the sort of things that we do in that pre-border offshore space, we're very involved in terms of international standards that are set around biosecurity measures on movement of goods and freight and produce and animal plant products. We put a lot of work as well into biosecurity risk assessments. So a lot of our science people are heavily involved in understanding what the risks are to New Zealand of things that may get you in some way, and what that means for us, what we would have to do. As Stu said, we have standards and rules around things that once they get you, what we expect to see. So the likes of ships and vessels coming here. We have requirements in place around biofouling. Things on the hull, etc., that we expect to be cleaned or not on the hull to bring things in. So stuff like that. And then as we do put a lot of work into imports, so allowing things in here, and the compliance that goes with that as well. So for example, operators that are in the business of importing things, that they're compliant with the requirements, and when stuff gets inside being treated or quarantined or inspected or that sort of stuff. Number of our staff, will go around inspecting things as well on the ports when they get here. So look, a lot of all this is risk based. We can't inspect everything that's coming our way or have a handle on every single thing, or that might be heading to New Zealand on a ship or a plane. So we do a lot of work about being risk based around us. It's about reducing those harmful things that could get in here, and the emphasis there, I think, is on harmful. So it's the things that will actually do the most damage to our environment, our primary industries, and our natural environment that's important to us. And also then that if something did get in here and establish here, we're able to get it at the stage when it's small in scope and we can deal with it. So science and intelligence supports that a lot. As I say, we've got a strong science capability that looks at what's out there, what's overseas, what could come our way if it got here and got established. How bad would it be for New Zealand? What do we do about it? We also, we have a lot of work around, as you mentioned, things that could be emergent. So, warmer waters with climate change. What are those marine diseases, pests that could get in there that might not have established here previously? And then working that back, then what does that actually mean? Do we need to put some new rules in place around vessels coming here? Is it certain countries, certain parts of the world? Things like that, the brown rime-rated stink bug that Stu mentioned. Our team's been doing some work on that. Well, we're always doing work on that, but ahead of this season, they took a look at both how the season had gone in those areas overseas where the stink bugs are prevalent. So what does that mean for their populations? And then also with COVID and the impacts on freight and shipping. In some cases, stuff is sitting around either on wharves or in warehouses for longer before it gets on a ship, and that's an opportunity for more of these stink bugs to get into containers or into freight. So what does that mean for us then? Do we need to up our measures, etc.? So we're continually, looking and adjusting and those sorts of things. And then just some of the other things we do, we do put a lot of work into the offshore space in auditing and programs with countries that we trade with and stuff comes through. So, we will do audits of offshore premises. And so we have sent people over to look at plants or areas where cargo is gathered and comes to New Zealand production facilities. So we have an active program around that, and we have best practice requirements, etc. We also have quite a strong program of work underway in the Pacific with our Pacific neighbours to get some good programs in place where we can have a high degree of confidence of things being able to come through into New Zealand with less hiccups and holdups, which is obviously important for the Pacific countries as well in terms of they can have a smooth supply and trade with us. So we do quite a bit of that. We have previously, in the past, we had people in Japan inspecting cars, the second-hand cars that we all buy from Japan, inspecting them before they left Japan to come here. We don't have people over there anymore. We still have an active program again around that the right things are being done in Japan before the vehicles are put on the ships. So that's a lot of all that, and we have lots of international collaboration from the science through to the operational area. Our scientists are very well connected in terms of what's going on in the biosecurity space around the world. And then the last bit of it is allowing things to come in here. Obviously, we import a lot into New Zealand, and so we have all the standards around there. We also, our industries, the horticulture in particular, but others as well, it's very important to be able to get plant material into New Zealand to keep growing, new varieties of fruit and vegetables and those sorts of things. So we do allow that because that's important. But we also then have measures in place around risk assessing what comes in here, and if we do let it in, how we test and quarantine it before it can be released. Our import health standards are a very key part of that. So you've probably heard a bit about those. Import health standards are essentially they're the rules around if you're going to send animal plant products into New Zealand, or we're going to import them. These are the things that need to be either done to them, or once they get here, how they should be treated or stored to minimise the biosecurity risk, and that varies depending on what the thing is, where it's come from, the time of year. Some of that can be treatment offshore before it gets there. Some of it could be treatment when it arrives there. So yeah, so that's a bit of an overview of the quite big pre-border space.
Yeah, it is quite big, and I've got a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind, and
Sure.
it'll probably segue into the border, and Stu, feel free to jump in if you have answers as well. And they are questions that often Tame and I get asked when we're out with our communities, and so I'm going to put them back to you so I've got a better answer. The first one is around risk assessment. So risk assessment, how is it done, and how does it take into account cultural and social values?
Sure, and Stu H, feel free to join in here. So, yeah, the risk assessment, it factors in quite a few things really. So there's obviously the sort of the biological science part of it in terms of a plant or an animal or a bacteria, whatever. If it got here, what do we know about it? So in terms of its biology and the environment that it lives in or thrives in overseas, does that match with New Zealand? So could it be established here? Could it spread? How far would it be likely to spread? What would the impacts be? What would the impacts be on our natural environment, some of our indigenous species, our production crops, agriculture, forestry, whatever. So there's a whole lot of science, all around that. And then there's obviously the likelihood that goes with that in terms of how could it get you, could it blow over from Australia, or to get you on a ship or a plane or a careless passenger or whatever, and how often could that happen? If it was a passenger, how likely would it be that they would get through all the things we already have in place? So there's all that sort of stuff goes into what's that likelihood of it getting here, and then once it's here, how would it establish if it gets spread? It's not all just economic in terms of if it affected farming or horticulture or forestry or fisheries. It's also how damaging could this be to our natural environment, to our indigenous species, taonga species, etc. So that is very much a part of that risk assessment. I guess in terms of how well we do factor in the cultural, social aspects of it. Look, I would say, I would say that we are getting better at that, and we've probably we've got more work to do in that space of really fully accounting of all those aspects and components, particularly the cultural, social impacts. We certainly don't ignore those, and we haven't. But I think increasingly as we move forward in this space, there is certainly opportunity for us to actively factor in and engage well to factor in those considerations in these standards, rules, and risk assessments.
I just see we had a question come through, and it's quite a good question. On New Zealand shores, we try and embed mātauranga into addressing the problem. What about embedding Indigenous knowledge from the host country of these potential risk species? Are we looking at that in the risk assessment?
Look, that's a really, really good point and a very good question. And so I don't know off the top of my head. I would suspect that that we may not have done that, certainly as thoroughly or as routinely as a part of the process as we certainly could or should. So again, I think as we keep moving forward in this with this work, and we update and we review and reset all these things, I think that's a really good point to factor into our processes around these rules and standards for international trade and goods.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of these webinars. There's always a diversity of thought. I hadn't even considered that. So, Sharon, I think someone owes you a wine or a beer for asking that question.
Yeah, really good.
certainly a good thought. The other thing that I would add is there's two aspects to the risk. There's the likelihood that it could get here, and then there's the ability for it to establish once it is here. And then what are the factors that might change over time around that? And so when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about climate change specifically as well. So as climate change factors occur, the risk factors will also occur as you know, our areas heat up or soil conditions can change and all that sort of thing. So it's a moving feast in terms of gathering that data and intelligence as to, you know, things will always potentially get here, but we need to also understand, will they arrive in sufficient numbers? Is the environment in the right place? Is the right host species available for it to potentially establish? So that's another part of that equation.
I thank you for that. Hey, I've got one more question for you pre-border before we move on to border and some of the more exciting things we can talk about, like tools and technologies. And it's because I see Hayden on here, so kia ora whananga, and I know that this is a question he's asked me before, and that is, if we know that there is a substantive risk from a particular part of the world for a pretty nasty incursion like the brown marmorated stink bug, and I acknowledge that you've said, you know, we have inspection and we have tools and measures in place offshore, but one of the questions that our whānau ask us, and I don't expect you to have the answers, but you could give us some guidance, one of the questions we often get is, why don't we just stop importing from there? So why don't we just stop importing cars from an area where we'll probably get an incursion?
Yeah, yeah, no, and I totally understand the question. And look, I'm not, so I don't know. I don't know if there are instances where we have done that in the past. We may have, but I don't know. You know, I think part of what goes with this as well is, you know, we are, you know, as I said, we are a trading nation. We're a small country, and we make our way by selling things overseas. We have very strict, you know, we would be the strictest in the world in terms of our biosecurity rules and requirements. And so we do put a lot on that. The other part of that, though, as well, is also to be, you know, as a trading country, we have to have trade agreements with other countries as well, to be able to sell our stuff and bring things in here. And so so it's a bit of a balancing act, really, that area, in terms of allowing trade and having those agreements with countries or groups of countries in those trade agreements, and also then protecting our environment and what's important to us. And those countries have their own things that they seek to protect as well. So it's not to say that that couldn't or wouldn't happen. There are a whole lot of other things that also go with, say, from a biosecurity point of view, we were really concerned about something from a particular country, or we didn't want it to come in here. There could well be other things around. Well, you know, we've got legal standing agreements in place with those countries to trade. So it's not to say that we can't do it or wouldn't do it, but some of those things are a little bit tricky to sort of work through.
So the other thing I'd jump in and say is if we didn't have confidence that our treatment offshore was able to actually minimise the risk, then that would take a reassessment. And we've certainly been not afraid to act in the face of information, like if you think back 2 or 3 years ago, where we interned entire shipments of cars around because there were high levels of stink bugs found on them. We've certainly closed down import pathways where we've had failure of treatment offshore with fruits, you know, where we find fruit fly larvae, for instance. So I think the system approach, where we're constantly monitoring and then acting and reacting, demonstrates that if we lacked the confidence that our system risk measurements or mitigations was not going to work, then we would potentially stop them.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Stu. And we've had some recent successes in that area. And I think also when other countries or those that send things here understand our reasons or our process, you know, we also get good results. So, you know, I think some of the shipments coming here with brown marmorated stink bug risk, you know, what we're now starting to see is some of those shipments being treated or stopping off and being treated along the way, as opposed to knowing they're on board in the freight and just waiting till they get to New Zealand. So so that way of working in partnership and communicating well does also pay. It still allows things to happen, but we can drive the risk down further by doing that.
And we have another question here, still on the same kaupapa. If we don't stop an import, then why not targeted bonds or levies for surveillance costs and planning? And that's from Steve Sharp.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, so I knew it was a tricky one.
Stu, please help me here as well. But I mean, we do, well, obviously, people the importers that bring stuff in here do obviously pay fees and levies for that, which goes towards our biosecurity activities. So there is a targeted fee or levy being paid by industry for particular biosecurity activities. So to a degree, we have that. I'm not sure about our ability to, at the moment, to go further in terms of some of those things. But I don't know, Stu, you have anything?
No, just that very much there is a user pays component around fees for those services to make sure that I guess there's an accountability sheeted back for what is required in order to manage the risk.
I see we have a Māori iwi kaitiakitanga question. I'm going to hold that one because it's a good one, but we'll come back to that. We'll circle back to that because I think it might pop up in some other things, especially one of the final questions we have. But moving from offshore to onshore, Stu Hutchings, you mentioned before about samurai wasp. And so I was wondering if you could quickly tell us about samurai wasp, but then also expand on and talk about other new tools and tech that might be helping the biosecurity system that we might find interesting.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, samurai wasp, I mean, it's probably a bit of an unfortunate name in that it has all of these horrible connotations just in that name, but it's actually a really small parasitoid wasp. It's about the size of a sesame seed, so really tiny. It doesn't actually have a sting. It certainly doesn't sting people. And what it does do is it specifically lays its eggs inside the eggs of the brown marmorated stink bug. So there's a symbiotic relationship that goes on there. And so it actually acts to kill the stink bug. And so it was first discovered in that relationship in China and is now being used as a tool in quite a lot of areas in the Northern Hemisphere and with varying degrees of success. So it's not a panacea. It's not something that will totally control the population of stink bugs should we get it in here. But what we wanted to do was have a tool in the toolbox that was able to be used potentially quite early on in the process to try and immediately reduce the impacts of a population should it establish here. So the tricky bit is that we then had to go through quite a robust process of being able to demonstrate that it wasn't going to be doing harm by us importing a new species in order to manage this as a tool. What you don't want to do is create one problem by trying to solve another, and history has demonstrated that we've done that plenty of times in the past. If you think back to all of the imported species that we've had, possums and rabbits and so on and so forth. So the work that was done had to clearly demonstrate that one, it was really effective and safe and specific primarily to the brown marmorated stink bug. Part of that work was being able to be done by looking at the research that occurred overseas. So it's certainly been used in United States and Europe and a lot of countries. And we've been able to monitor the progress that they've done there. When we went for the approval with EPA, the condition of that approval is that it was only able to be used or brought into New Zealand should we actually get stink bugs here as a population. So we're not able to just have it around in the environment waiting for that eventuality. So that in itself has led to a whole bunch of problems about how do you then have a population that's ready to go should we need it. And so there was a number of solutions that we're thinking about there, whether you can hold them eggs frozen or have a source that we could import from overseas in the face of an outbreak. So all of those kind of things. So I guess the key message here is that that using natural species to control other pest species is not something that's new. It's been done quite a few times and done very effectively, and provided we've done the right amount of work around the care around the unwanted potential side impacts, it can be really effective. I come back to also the fact that that would be a tool that we would use as part of a range of other tools in order to try and minimise the impacts of an incursion of stink bug. The best tool of all is not to get it here in the first place.
Oh, why, thank you for that. And I think it's a really good point that the best tool is not to get it here. So prevention is the best tool. And Whānau, before you bombard our chat with questions about biocontrols and the EPA process, we'll save that for another webinar. Because I know that many of you will have issues with that process and biocontrol agents. And Tami and I are up for a conversation about that, but just not necessarily right now. And what I love about the Samurai Wasp example is that because we were being preemptive, we had time to chat to Māori communities. And I remember the stink bug coming around to a number of hui, and me and myself being really surprised, as you say, Stuart, how tiny it is. And that's not, I'm not putting out a position there. I'm just saying I was surprised at how tiny it was. So that was a really good process, I thought, to have a conversation about something that could happen without getting worried about what we might be releasing. And I know that one of our co-founders, Nick, is on, and I'm sure you'll have lots to say about biocontrol agents, Nick, but again, we're going to leave those for later. Well, I think what you've segued us into nicely is two conversations, and I probably will throw over to you now, Stuart, as well. And that is one around new tools and technologies and innovation that can help us be preventative and start us to be prepared for new incursions. Mycoplasma bovis was an incursion that for some of us, probably not you, for some of us took us by surprise, but it seemed to be a really effective program from the Biosecurity New Zealand end, and you seem to have some relatively quick wins and some really strong processes to get to a space where it feels like it's, and I'm sure you've still got ongoing monitoring, but it feels like you've had a big win in this space. And so one, could you tell us a wee bit about that program and what it's taught you and us about the system, but also whether there was any new tools or technologies that helped you kind of deal with that incursion?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Mel. Yeah, look, it certainly wasn't always easy, that's for sure. And for those of you that either, well, if you are either involved with it in any way or followed it from the beginning, you would know that. So Mycoplasma bovis, look, I think it did catch us all by surprise, actually. So it was discovered in 2017 on a dairy farm in the South Island. First time discovered in New Zealand. Overseas, a disease that a lot of countries live with and manage. But it does have quite detrimental impacts on animals, dairy animals or cattle, in terms of animal welfare, mastitis and lameness and abortions, and so quite nasty animal health impacts on the animals. It also significantly impacts production. So the decision was made. It was a call whether to do what everyone else had done and live with it and manage it and accept those impacts, or did we feel that we had it in the early stages of an outbreak whereby we could actually try and eradicate it. So the decision was made to do the latter and eradicate it. So it's been the biggest biosecurity response that New Zealand has had to deal with, the biggest animal disease response as well. It's now, it started, like I say, end of 2017, 2018, it really kicked off. So it's now into the year 4-5, heading into year 5. Yes, and it has got to a good point. It's not, the job isn't done yet with M. bovis. We haven't eradicated it, but we are very confident that we're heading well on the track to be able to do so and to not just to declare New Zealand free of M. bovis. There's probably still another 5 to 6 years to go of that process. It always was envisaged to be a 10-year program. But where we're at now is, yes, we've broken the back of it, most definitely. I think at the moment we've got 3 properties that are infected, all in Canterbury. We've had over 270, and there were times in the previous years where we had 30, 40, or over more, maybe 50 odd at a time. So it's down to very low levels, but we do know we've still got, there might be a few more to find. There's a few years of ongoing background surveillance to really say we've gotten rid of it. So yes, look, it is looking like it will be a successful program, and that for New Zealand, we've done the right thing. Everyone, farmers, all the farmers involved with it who've had really traumatic experience of having to deal with it, and the industry partners and government, it's been the right thing to do. Like I say, look, it's been a hard program, and everyone has learned a lot out of it. The first 2 years were by no means easy, and even if it had been easy and we'd known exactly what to do right from the outset, it still always would have been an incredibly hard and traumatic thing for anyone to go through. To have M. bovis essentially means that your farm gets shut down. You can't move anything off it. All your animals get cold, and your place gets disinfected, and you can start again a few months later, and we'll pay you some compensation for it. So it's an incredibly traumatic experience, and stressful on farmers and their whānau and the communities. What we and I learned out of that. So I came into it 2 years ago when those first couple of sort of the hardest years we're getting to a better place. But look, I mean, the thing that I learned the most out of it, and I think everyone in the program learned out of it, was it's the people. It was the people aspect of this whole program. I think from a disease control management point of view, we kind of largely knew what to do. You find it and then you deal with it, like I say. But this was different to other biosecurity responses, where you weren't just going out and either trapping and spraying something or digging it up and burning it and it's done. This goes on for some time. For dairy farmers, it can be a couple of years before they get back to where they were. And that traumatic impact on people and their livelihoods, and a farm it's not just a business, it's a life, and it's everything tied up with the family. So I think that was something that we learned from the early stages, that we really needed to work with people, work with farmers, and look after that whole emotional well-being, welfare side of things, and do what we could do to support that. So and for me, my time in the program, that was the biggest thing too. Is at the end of the day, you're dealing with real people, and you have to work with people, and you have to acknowledge what they're going through. And our job is to make it the least painful and the least stressful it can be. So that would really be the biggest thing in terms of tools and things that we developed or improved. Yeah, we've done a lot in that regard, a hell of a lot out of M. bovis. We've built up a fantastic epidemiological disease veterinary capability, modelling and intelligence capabilities out of it. We've also got fantastic people who've worked in the program that really can work well with farmers and rural people, and that's a skill that could be applied to a whole raft of other areas and responses for the future. So that expertise and those capabilities are fantastic, and our job now, as the M. bovis program will get smaller and we'll go more into that surveillance, our job is to capture all those lessons, embed them in the biosecurity system, so that those people, those tools, techniques, processes are embedded in our system, so that we're that better prepared for the next one of these things that comes along.
Yeah, definitely some good learnings, and it's been interesting from outside the system, or outside the industry, I should say, watching the M. bovis and seeing some good learnings for other responses as well. Right, I was going to say we're down to the pointy end, but I think it's all good. Two questions that have popped up on the chat. What does Māori iwi kaitiakitanga actually mean? How does it look? And probably a more detailed question, what would a cultural toolbox look like, or cultural sensitive impact tool look like? What I'll do though is, you might answer it in this. The question is, what role do or will Māori play in the system, in the biosecurity system? And so if you want to drill down into some of those finer details that will answer those questions, go for it. But yeah, I'll start with you, Stu Hutchings, perhaps.
Okay, well, coming to the first one around the presentation, the diagram, the concept of having Māori iwi around the outside and sitting alongside Crown with kaitiangatanga is around the guardianship. So it's encapsulating the whole of the biosecurity system and saying that we're working together with treaty partners and wanting to ensure that everything that we are trying to undertake, especially from a system perspective, takes into consideration and works in a collaborative way with Māori. So that was what that means for me sitting there.
Nice.
Yeah. Look, and I'll just add as well. You know, Stu's absolutely right, and you know, absolutely for us in you know, biosecurity, we really recognise you know the cultural values that go within the biosecurity system, the importance of those cultural values. That this isn't just economic or primary production, but also you know, increasingly. Well, not increasingly, but I think increasingly for us, the importance of allowing mana whenua to exercise kaitiakitanga and the working together and allowing for that, you know, absolutely as a core part of the system and the way we do things, and that is an area that we're putting a lot more effort and focus into, and rightfully so. You know, we haven't got it entirely right, and we're not there. But we have made some progress, and we are you know, actively working and taking steps towards improving how we absolutely recognise and give effect to that, and then we ultimately you know, work well together, because that is so important that we have that partnership approach within the system. So you know, we've internally we are doing we're doing quite a bit of work around our own cultural capability and awareness and appreciation in Biosecurity New Zealand. And Tame, you know, you've been a part of this journey with us. You know, it was an absolute pleasure to have you loaned to us, and thank you, Mel, for 6 months or so last year to really I guess sort of set us on this journey a bit, and you know, we now have an increasing capability within our team in Biosecurity New Zealand, and externally as well. That you know, we really we've got a treaty partnerships engagement team. We've got a strategy that we've developed Ngā Tūhono ki te tiriti around how we go about engaging meaningfully from the outset with ahika people at place, so that we actually do that right. So we haven't got it all right, but you know, we're heading in the right direction, and it's where we need to get to.
So probably quite good also, Stu, to talk about some examples, and one of those is the recent Kalupa response that we've had up in Blind Bay in Aotearoa Great Barrier Island, and it's an invasive seaweed that can spread really rapidly and be quite harmful to native fish nurseries and algae. And what Biosecurity New Zealand did there is partner with mana whenua and the Auckland Council and DOC together in response to that invasive seaweed. We undertook a cultural sensitivity impact, and mana whenua reviews that and then approved it as part of the process that we put in place. And then part of the process, we put in a controlled area notice, but concurrently also laid down a rauhui at the same time in partnership with the mana whenua, so that we was that collaborative, collective approach to managing the impacts of this incursion.
Yeah, I think there was a question about the cultural sensitivity. So you know, we could always get some more detail on how that was done for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. And I acknowledge your team that are online tonight. So Carmen, I can see her there, and the team that are working behind the scenes to do that. I have probably two questions for you, and they're hopefully not too pointy, but you guys know me by now. And they both segue off of what you've said, obviously, so I can kind of push the blame back on you anyway. They're not mean. One is, you alluded to this idea that, that increasingly of importance to Biosecurity New Zealand is the conservation estate as well. So my question is, and again, because it's one that we get, is what is the difficulty of doing that, or are there difficulties doing that when you're sitting in MPI with a primary industry focus, and for Māori, often our biggest incursion worries are in the conservation estate. So, kind of a quick fire answer to how you balance conservation versus primary industry.
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, my quick answer to that is, well, no, it isn't difficult, and it doesn't need to be difficult. So, the two go hand in hand. Yes, we're part of the ministry for primary industries, but biosecurity system, as we've been talking about tonight, covers it's New Zealand and everything we hold dear in New Zealand, in our natural environment and the productive environment. So, look, it's not difficult, and it doesn't need to be. And I think there's absolutely, we do already work very closely with the Department of Conservation, and we've got joint projects and initiatives underway with them, and we absolutely will keep doing that. And there's a strong desire between both agencies that we do work really well together. Obviously, my predecessor Penny Nelson is in the driving seat over there as well, and she's already been talking to me about us getting together and talking on biodiversity and biosecurity, how they go together, and equally also how we can more meaningfully connect between the three bits of that as well in the government space, us, Department of Conservation, and the local government regional councils. So yeah, that would be what I would say for that.
Awesome. Great. That's music to our ears, isn't it, whānau? And then my other one, before I know Tammy's got some burning questions, my other one is a wee bit around the tools that you talked about with your latest response in Aotearoa. And of course, TT Dub's catchline, our tagline is Indigenous Tools for a Better Planet. So of course, we have a vested interest in using our knowledge to respond to biosecurity incursions. And I know that there are plenty of examples, including in the Te Arawa Lakes, that Tammy will be well aware of. So it's great to hear you working with mana whenua. What's the process or consideration, and I know it's tentative steps for you, around co-designing the tools that we use in an incursion response?
Yeah, so well, look, I mean, again, I think it comes down to that engagement right from the outset. So when something's found or a response kicks off, and I think this is what was done well in Aotearoa. It's engaging right from the outset and sitting down together and figuring out, well, what do we need to actually do here? And then, if that comes down to co-designing some of the tools or the processes around the way of getting us there, well, then those are the conversations that we just need to have.
I'll just quickly acknowledge Matua Peter Howie as well from Aotearoa. I see he's joined online, and I see Aotearoa's featured quite a bit in our discussion so far, so it's only right that we acknowledge those over there. So tēnei te mihi kia koutou. Sue Hutchings, you mentioned before about Rahui, using Aotearoa as an example. And it brings me to another one. Again, these are quick fire questions. How are we going with the Biosecurity Act review? Because I know a lot of whānau wanted Rahui enforced using the Act. Or anyone?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So yes, the Act review. Look, it's not it's not stopped or not happening. It's just the process of working through these things. We have obviously had COVID disrupting things in terms of some of the government timetable. So look, where it's all at, it is with ministers at the moment in terms of making some decisions to move it forward into the next step, which would be a broad public consultation and engagement process around those proposals. So we're still working to that plan, but it's at the moment, like I said, it's sitting with ministers to discuss and for us to then land the next steps in that process.
Following on from that as well, then GIA. What's the next steps for GIA?
Well, good question. So, look, I think, and I suppose I'll rely on my few months in the role. But look, GIA. So yes, we've got it to the point where there's a reasonable number of signatories to GIA. There's more that could still sign. There's a few things that we know, we can collectively do to make it work well and keep it working well. So I think it's and the Bovis, the M Bovis experience is a lot to learn again from there. It's obviously been a very big response and a complicated response with government and 2 industry partners signed up to jointly funding and overseeing that program. There's been a big review of the M Bovis done that's pointed to some lessons out of that. So I think it's I think at the moment with GI it's a matter of if we need to work on getting some more signed up, then obviously that's something that will be worked on, but it's also just getting it to really keep those enhancements and improvements to how it is working so that it works the best way, and we learn the lessons from things like M Bovis and others that come along.
So I'll jump in there as well, Mel and Tame, because I'm aware that the current framework and model is that the industry partners that are around the table are those that have production and pay levies, and so the model itself makes it difficult, I guess, to go wider in terms of membership or people that are involved, and I know that is a point of concern for Māori, and so I guess part of the framing that is in the Biosecurity Act is thinking about how can that framework of government industry agreement work to be wider in terms of how it brings everybody together. So it's been a very effective means of readiness and response activity specific to a lot of pests and diseases, which is what the drivers were. But for me, it's got the potential of being a much wider framework where we can collectively bring people together and work towards these solutions.
Me or you, Mel?
Oh, either. Well, when we're talking about frameworks, there's been a really good question come in to us from our really good friend Chucky, and she was quite keen, and again, this is probably going to be quite hard for you to answer, but she was really keen to know where and how legal personalities like Te Urewera, the Taranaki Maunga, Te Awa Tupua or Wanganui River sit within a framework or within a biosecurity framework and within our engagement in the biosecurity system. So just the easy questions, Chucky? For that. But yeah, I suspect there's probably more than one that I'm going to leave with you to mull over. But if you have an initial response, then feel free to drop it with us, or tell me if you've got an idea on how those legal personalities sit within a biosecurity framework.
I'll buy you guys some time and I'll share my thoughts. It's quite easy for Te Ao Māori. I mean, not to steal it, but to take the whakatauki of Whanganui, Kau te awa ko te awa koe, they treat the awa as they treat themselves. So they don't look at sort of biosecurity separate from sort of health. So when they look at an incursion that's going to have impact on the river, they look at it like they would COVID. It's going to impact on their health. So they treat them the same. So when we look at COVID, we pulled out all the stops. Like you say, the health system and the biosecurity system pulled out all the stops to manage COVID. And I would imagine for them, they would do the same if there was anything that was going to impact the awa. Unfortunately, some of the powers that be don't. There are barriers for them to enable that, to enact that. And I certainly know that's the case for Te Urewera as well. So if I was king of everything, I would start looking at removing those barriers and giving them the tools and providing them with the tools to start addressing it the way they would like to. But interested to hear you guys' answers.
Yes, that is it's a really good question, and it is probably one to mull over. But I mean, thanks, Tame. And I mean, I think what I'd also say is, those legal provisions or settings that are in place, those obviously, that obviously means, we obviously have to be mindful and cognizant of those, and factor that into our processes and how we go about with our engagement on biosecurity issues, or our, how we oversee the system and incorporate that in. Whether there's look, it is a good question, whether there's anything that ties into this work around the Biosecurity Act review related to that is something I don't know. But Stu, maybe you might know, or I think it's certainly something for us to take away and think about within that context of if that act's being reviewed. Is there something there legislatively for us to consider?
Yeah, well, I guess there's thinking about it in terms of the legislative framework, but it's also in terms of the relationship framework. And so the work that we're starting to do now in terms of the wider biosecurity system and how we interact with all of the players that have an interest and involvement in that system is a way, I think, of improving that engagement. And so we have started a process now of some work of thinking about how can we improve the way we as Biosecurity New Zealand, but also the other stakeholders or people that are involved in the wider system, how can we interact better and learn each other's views and work with each other towards the outcome for me, which is a more resilient biosecurity system that works effectively for all of those that are participating in it. So that's not a solution or an answer, but at least it's a way forward to start that discussion. And Mel has certainly been involved in that initial think tank group that we've begun with that process around building the system together, each understanding our own role within it, and then working out what accountabilities and parts that we can play to make it work in a more strong way towards the end point.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're all after the same thing as well, a better protected environment and our economic values and social and cultural values. So the barriers that we can remove to help everyone, I think everyone will be all for it. Another tricky question, gene editing. Where's that going to feature? Is that going to feature in our biosecurity system anytime?
Stu, do you want to have
I guess, I mean, it comes back to that initial conversation we had, that there's a whole bunch of potential tools in the toolbox, right? And it's a bit like when you talk about predator-free 2050 and the big bold visions and what do you need for step changes to get from here to here. So those potential tools are available. In our immediate thinking, we aren't utilising or working with those tools. It's something that, again, I think involves a conversation right from the get-go, if that was going to be something that we were talking about, that we need to be working. So what does it mean? What do we mean when we're talking about gene editing? What place does it have? Where are the levels of risk? What are the acceptance factors? What are the impacts from a cultural as well as a scientific and outcome perspective? So short answer is no. Longer answer is we need to keep talking about these things, because the more risks we face into the future, the more tools and technology and science that we're going to have to bring to bear to try and help manage those.
Well, people might be pleased to know that we are looking at featuring it on a webinar later on down the track, because it is a kaupapa worth exploring on its own. So we will we'll have our own webinar for that. I see time is running short. I've got a few more questions loaded up, but we'll go back to one sort of final question that we're asking all webinar participants. What does the future of biosecurity look like? And you kind of both have touched on it at separate times, but yeah, and a few words, what do you think the future of biosecurity looks like?
Okay, well, you
go first.
So, yeah. Look, I mean, for me, what is the future? What does the biosecurity system look like in the future? What's the future of it? I think it's absolutely for us to continue having a world-class system that protects New Zealand. And it's maybe not so much the world class that's important. It's the fact that we have a system that continues to protect everything we value in New Zealand, from pests and diseases that could harm those things. What that looks like is, it's a well joined up system from end to end, as we talked about tonight. That all those who need to be engaged in the system and have an important part to play in the system are both engaged and play their part, and then we all work together to achieve that outcome. And then the other part of it is, into the future. Well, as we move into the future, we have an agile and fit for the future system, so that we really keep leveraging off data, information, science, technology, and that includes social and cultural knowledge and information, so that we truly are innovative in how the system can adapt and continue to be fit for purpose for us.
Good answer, Stu. Thank you. I guess the challenge that I also think about is how do we have a system that is enduring, so that and we had this discussion with this wider biosecurity group the other day, which is thinking about a system that endures as a multi-generational prospect, because it's not only us, but it's our children and our children's children that we're wanting to preserve our place for into the future. So for me, the system has to, as Stu said, be science-based. It has to be adaptive and flexible. We have to try and make sure that we all collectively are working towards this future vision, and that has to be a system that is able to, in an enduring way, protect our natural taonga, our economy, and our culture and our way of life as a collective. So it's not necessarily providing the answers about how we do that. And I think we've got a long way in terms of the science that we do have and the way that we actually manage our risk now. But I think we're in a world which is incredibly volatile. We've got things like climate change, we've got emerging other species, we've got diversity of challenges facing us, we've got changing economic drivers. And so we need to be able to work within all of that dynamic space in order to deliver on what we need to do. And so for me, it's going to be a big ask to actually get ourselves there. And the only way we're going to achieve that is everybody understanding what part they play in helping to deliver it. Because for me, what it won't work is just saying, oh, that's somebody else's job. That's something that Biosecurity New Zealand's got to do, or something that regional councils have got to do. I think we really need to collectively go, I can do this, I can do this. We can work together to actually make that impact a whole lot bigger.
Nice. Mel, over to you.
Yeah, and I guess I want to thank everyone for their time and participating. And this is going to be my we wrap up, and then Tammy's going to hand over, I think, to the stews to have a final word. And I want to again thank everyone and acknowledge your participation in this. Thank both the stews for giving us your time and your knowledge. This isn't the end of the conversation. As Tammy said, there are more to come. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that might answer your question, Daryl, in the chat, and also provide a bit of space for final comments. Again, a reminder that TTW was established with a biosecurity focus because we really genuinely believe that the Māori economy that is predominantly based on land and water, so on our natural estate, is underpinned by strong biosecurity systems. One big biosecurity incursion could wipe out a large chunk of our Māori economy. It's why biosecurity is so important to us. Not to say that other conservation and environmental management isn't. It's just that we believe that biosecurity is the foundation. It's why we've been passionate about it and seeing some overhaul in the system and seeing it, as you say, Stu, being designed for the long term, being an enduring intergenerational system. All those things that you espouse to are our views and our hopes for the system, as well as it being centred in the promise of the treaty, which I know Biosecurity New Zealand are also committed to. So it's good having this journey with you in these conversations. For us and Te Tira Whakamātaki, we're taking a big gamble this year. This is our year of growth. like the government in the middle year of their term, it's our delivery year, or our year of growth. And we've got a few key areas of investment for us this year and interest, one of which is in the policy space. And we have a new policy leader coming on in a month or so, and you'll get to meet them at the next webinar. Our focus, like you've said, Stu and Stuart, is about the Act's overhaul, or the Act amendments, in large part because it's not fit for purpose. It's not fit for Aotearoa New Zealand, and it's not fit for a treaty relationship. So I'm really excited about working with the teams and giving you our thoughts and ideas around that. And I want to touch on a wee bit of a comment that came, I think was a wee bit behind Chucky's question around legal personalities, and Tame, your answer is that Māori aren't resourced to be in the system at the moment. And so it's really hard to defend your awa that is a person when you're not resourced to do so, or the awa isn't being given its voice. And I want to acknowledge your thoughts, Chucky, behind your question, which is reminding us that they are personalities and beings in their own right. The river is, the maunga is, the forest is. And if they were a human and they were being impacted by a disease like COVID, as you said, Tame, we would pull out all stops to ensure that they not only gave us consent for the response, for the health response, but that we were ensuring that we were doing everything we could to save their life. And the only other point is that those awa, those maunga, those ngahere aren't being compensated for the things that are impacting them from other industries who are getting compensated in biosecurity incursions. So there are some complexities in the system and the policy space that we need to take into consideration if we want a fit for purpose, future focused, treaty centered system. And that's our commitment this year, is to really work hard with you, Biosecurity New Zealand, in that space. The other area where we're focusing this year is in education and training. So Te Tira Whakamātaki, the foundation, is an education trust. Tame is leading that. So Daryl, to your point, there are big biosecurity, big skill gaps in the biosecurity system. We all know that. Landcare Research did a report recently with Bill Dick, so acknowledge that you're online, Bill, that acknowledged some of those gaps, and we, for our part, we'll do what we can to start to try and address those, but we know others in the system will be doing the same, and no doubt both of the stews will be thinking about that, their roles and their hats on, so I'm sure they'll note that. And there are some other areas we're focusing on, which I'll leave for now, but I always close, you all know, I always close with my seed bank. Ultimately, seed conservation and my seed bank is the big goal, so that will never change, and we'll still be working on that as well, because at the end of the day, that's a big part of the biosecurity system's response in the prevention space. So yeah, look forward to talking to you all more. Thank you, Stu and Stu, for your time.
Thank you.
We're really looking forward to the next webinar and the symposium that everyone will hear about, but I'd love to hear your wrap-ups and your thoughts as well.
Yes, any final words from either of you, or final words, I should say?
Well, if I go first and then Stu can finish up, we'll change the order. I guess I've really appreciated the openness and invitation to be able to come and speak to you all. I'm really appreciative of the role that TTW plays. We're just so conscious that we're on a learning pathway, and to have guidance and provocation and collaboration to help us along that pathway is really invaluable. So thanks everyone for taking the time. I hope we have been able to share some knowledge with you, probably encourage more questions than satisfaction with the answers, but I guess that's part of a journey as well. So thanks everyone.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you. Look, this has been fantastic. So thank you very much for the invite. This is my first sort of real proper engagement as the DDG. So nice. It's been a privilege. So yeah, look, the kōrero has been really great. I hope we have managed to provide some insights, and as you said as well, you know, you have posed some very good points to us to go away and think about, and some questions for us to really think about in terms of how we move ourselves forward, working well with everyone. So yeah, look, it's been an absolute privilege, and thank you. I look forward to you know, participating again in the future.
Cheers. Be careful what you wish for as well, because as I said, this is a series of webinars, and we will be coming back to you. As some people, sharp-eyed people, may have seen, joining us on the webinar tonight on the Zoom was Simon Lambert. And Simon was an early guest on one of our webinars, and now has come back to New Zealand and is tied up with us. So Maybe that's a hint at things that if you join these webinars, you come work for us or you come work with us. Engari, tērā te mihi ki a koe, Simon. I will encourage everyone as well, please sign up to our newsletters to hear more about our next series of webinars and our next guests, and keep those questions coming in. And if you'd like to see anyone else joining us on these webinars, please fire those through as well. I did get one random request from Te Arawa if they can have some more money for their catfish program, they'll be happy. I have to say that because they're my cousins. But with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again. I'll close this with a karakia, and so everyone have a good night. Tēnei tātou, ko tuku ngā kōrero ki te pai tata, tēnei tātou ko tuku ngā whakaaro ki te pai tawhiti, whakairihia e nei whakaaro ki te wānanga o tēnā, tūturu whakamaua kia tīna, haumia hui e, kai ki e. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Kia ora.